So, Prynhawn da pawb, good afternoon all, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to this Humanities Network meeting, which will be focused today on humanities skills, which are aligned to Statements What Matters 1 and Statements What Matters 2. Just to give you a rough agenda, an outline for what's to come over the next hour. I'm going to start with Statements What Matters 1, and we'll look at, first of all, historical inquiry. I'm then going to hand over to Lisa Wilkinson from Goetrefell Primary School, one of our partner schools, who will be sharing with you how they have been trying to develop historical inquiry skills within their school. I'll then move on to geographical inquiry skills and specifically looking at map skills. And we have a video from Glanes Primary showing how they've been developing map skills within their classroom. I'll then move on to Statement What Matters 2 and look at interpretation skills. We have another then little video from Glanes Primary about interpretation skills. We'll have a breakout discussion followed to wrap things up with questions and an evaluation. So we'll get going. So in education, the word skills are used very frequently. There are different types of skills within the curriculum. We've got our cross-curricular skills, such as literacy and numeracy and digital, and they're given the utmost priority. They are mandatory within the framework. We've also got integral skills, such as creativity and innovation, problem solving, etc. Within AOLEs, we have more skills. And then to complicate matters even further, sometimes within disciplines, we have different skills as well. So therefore, it's really important when we're talking about skills to be really clear which ones we're actually discussing. So for the purpose of this meeting, we are going to talk about two humanities skills, inquiry and interpretation. And in sometimes, specifically with the inquiry, we'll break that down and look at the difference specifically in history and geography. But it is important to note that in humanities, these skills of inquiry and interpretation, they are intrinsically linked to cross-curricular skills. So if you are teaching inquiry or interpretation skills, you're not actually teaching anything different to those cross-curricular skills. They are one of the same thing. So it's important to see this as not an add-on, that you are simply just enhancing children's cross-curricular skills by teaching the skill of inquiry and interpretation. A key thing to also be mindful of with humanities skills is that inquiry and interpretation, so Statements What Matters 1 and 2, shouldn't really be taught in isolation. They should always be taught alongside knowledge, which then marries up to Statements What Matters 3, 4 and 5. So if we take the first statement of what matters then, Statements What Matters 1, which is inquiry, exploration, and investigation. Within school, traditionally, inquiry skills have been looked at and developed and taught within history and geography. In geography, inquiry skills are also known as geographical fieldwork, whereas then in history, when we undertake an inquiry, we do so to discover or answer questions about the past. Now, that's not to say that inquiries can't be undertaken within RVE, social science and business studies. They can. There are some slight differences between a history inquiry and a geography inquiry, which we'll look at momentarily. But then there are nuances between a geography inquiry and an RVE, social studies and business studies inquiry. So I'm going to start by looking at history inquiry skills. So within history, an inquiry is about using primary or contemporary sources to understand and answer questions about the past, to help us imagine what the past was like. And it's really important for you as practitioners to understand the difference between a primary and contemporary source, but we wouldn't necessarily expect children in primary school to understand the difference. So as you can see on the screen, a primary source is a source of evidence from the past that's potentially not new to you, or from someone who experienced the event. So for example, a diary entry of a soldier in World War I. whereas a contemporary source is a source of evidence from the past being studied, but not necessarily a first-hand experience. So, for example, a newspaper report published in 1916 in Britain about the Battle of the Somme. So they're both from the time, but there are a slight difference in who has created them, which is the difference between a primary and a contemporary source. So when we use evidence, the first thing that we would look at is the content of the historical evidence or the source. So what that source says, if it's a written source or if it's a picture, a poster, a photograph, what it might show. And ultimately, this information can help us determine if a source is useful to our historical inquiry. And the content will also help us answer our question about what life was like in the past. Now, this is the easier part of the skill. We don't want children to copy a written source. We'd like them to understand what they're reading and what they can see. We'd like them to be able to put it in their own words. And as they become more competent, ultimately use their inference skills to apply what they can read and see as well. So, as I said, this will help us fill in the gaps about the past, and it will tell the narrative of the past, the story. I often, with this part of the skill, compare it to catchphrase. So if it's a picture source or a poster, a photograph, ultimately just say what you see, don't overcomplicate it. So as children progress in these skills of inquiry, what we will then start to do is start to use this information to decide and make a judgment on how useful the source is, so its utility. And then when they are competent, they can start to move on to look at how reliable historical sources are, because it's important to remember that all historical sources will be useful to a certain extent. They will always tell you something, but they won't always tell you the whole picture. However, they may not always be reliable. So in order to determine if a source is reliable, we would need to look at the attribution. So we would look at who created that source, when it was created, maybe where it was created, the type of document it is, and the purpose of the document, and even maybe the audience. Now, this information, when using historical sources, is known as an attribution. Now, having said this, as I said, we wouldn't expect children lower down the school working in progression step 1 to be able to apply some of these skills of reliability and trustworthiness. However, as a child becomes more competent with the content of a historical source, then they could start to look at the attribution. So potentially that could be towards the end of progression step 2, albeit at a basic level. And the challenge of this will also come into play with the type of evidence as well. So sometimes identifying who's created a source or who it's aimed at and the audience will be more obvious in some pieces of historical evidence than others. If a child has to use their inference skills to determine some of those things, then that's a more challenging skill. So at this point now, I'm going to hand you over to Lisa from Goitrevau Primary School, who will now share how she's been trying to encourage elements of these skills with her class. And I believe it was with a year 6 class, but she'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong. So over to you, Lisa.
Thank you. Hopefully you can now see my screen.
You might need to move the slide along. There we go. Yeah.
So I'm actually in year 5, but it's something that we looked at in our year 5 and 6 classes. And to give you a bit of context, our Curriculum for Wales approach is around vehicles for learning. So we have a 10-week-long vehicle which begins with an immersion day and ends with a showcase event, which is an authentic purpose. Humanities is our summer term vehicle, so the whole school will be doing humanities in the summer term, and we cover the 5 disciplines of humanities within that vehicle for learning. So the vehicle for learning that I was doing last summer was one called Coal Dust and Cynefin, and we'd had a visit to Big Pit as our immersion day, and the children had found out lots of information from that. I'd also attended training with Bridie on analysing and evaluating evidence, which was really useful, and something that I was really keen to try. The children had also done some work, lots of you will be familiar with the literacy learning pathways, about the story of Lot, which is a fictional story about a child who worked in the pits and was interviewed by a man from London about her experience. And so the children were had got a grounding of understanding and some knowledge about the period in history that we were looking at. So the evidence we used were records from the 1842 Parliamentary Commissioners Report. I put a link on there for the South Wales aspect of that, but if you just Google it, there's loads of information out there, and it's a fascinating read because it's interviews with children about their working environments and their thoughts on working in the pits. So what that gave children was the primary evidence that they could then have a look at across Britain. So then what we did was we came up with our question, which was how useful and reliable is evidence to a historian studying the South Wales coalfields. And we looked at two pieces of evidence, which were interviews that were done from the Parliamentary Commissioners Report. And you can see the attribution to that at the top there. So I think for this, we did it as a whole class because it was our first time of doing it. And I have to say the oracy that we got from this, of them talking with each other, talking with us about, you know, well, what was valuable and what was reliable and how could they analyse the evidence, was huge, you know, really, really impressive. So they had to identify strengths and limitations, and we went through, they had time looking at the evidence, and then we went through it as a class and we went through it together and annotated it then to show what the strengths were. And then we went on to the limitations. Now, it was really interesting when we came to limitations because they were applying their prior knowledge about the fact that they felt that it may not be honest. Some of the children may not have been honest because of the fact they were being interviewed by someone they knew was important. So it was interesting, and actually I kind of kept saying to them, well, what does the evidence tell us? And they were saying, but we know this, we know that this happened. So they were, you know, putting their own knowledge, their prior knowledge to that. The benefits of doing this was it gave lots of useful information which informed our understanding and influenced their work going forward, and they kept referring back to the evidence that they'd looked at and the how they might feel if they were being interviewed by a head teacher or someone from the local authority about something. It also allowed us to be quite critical, and that's something that I don't think I'd done very much of before, where we'd looked at evidence and we've looked at how useful it was, but actually it gave us an opportunity to think, well, why might this not be reliable? And that was really, I felt that after Bridie's training, that really, really pushed their learning by doing that. And they were also able to tell me that it didn't give a whole picture, that they needed more evidence, which then led them into wanting to find out more. So it sparked their interest as well. And one of the main things is that it prepares them for writing a discussion text. So it's one of the most challenging texts within literacy, I find, at upper, what was Key Stage 2, mustn't call it that, upper phase. But having done the analysis where we identified strengths and limitations, it made this so much easier. And actually they were able to, they used the same question, which helped. Their first paragraph was about what was useful, their second paragraph was what was reliable, and their third paragraph was their conclusion. Now, it's the first time they'd done it, so going forward, you'd expect them to be writing more and perhaps having a couple of paragraphs on each one. And also, as they become more familiar with the analysis process, that this type of writing they'll find easier. So this year, what we're planning on doing is in year 5 and year 6, we will be doing analysis of evidence. And in year 4 and year 3, we'll be doing the oracy part of it, where we'll be having that discussion about, well, why is this evidence useful and how is it reliable, but also that limitations part, which was really, really valuable to do and something I would definitely repeat. So I feel like I've given you a whistle-stop tour and talked at you. So if there's any questions, is that okay, Bridie, to...
Yeah, absolutely. It was a whistle-stop tour, but in my opinion, it was straight to the point. So does anybody have any questions for Lisa? Take the silence as that everyone's okay. If you do have a question or something comes to mind, then please pop it in the chat or save it for a little bit later on. So if you are interested and would like some further support or professional learning on this, and Lisa mentioned a course that she attended last year with myself, that is rerunning again this year. So this will be aimed at primary practitioners, and it's going to be on the 14th of March at St Joseph's Roman Catholic High School, and it will be delivered by the head of history at St Joe's, but also Lisa is going to support Adam at St Joe's also. So if you would like to attend that, then please do reserve your place. The link on the screen should take you straight to Ticket Source to book your place on that training. So moving on then, and we're looking at geographical inquiry now. So we'll stick in with Statement of What Matters 1. A geographical inquiry is different from a historical inquiry. Geographical inquiry, as mentioned at the start, is also known as fieldwork. Primary evidence within a geographical inquiry is data collected by the pupil, whereas secondary evidence is data collected by someone else. So, for example, a newspaper article or a report published by the Met Office. So with a geography inquiry, it's an active process, very much like a science experiment. And embedded within geographical inquiry are map skills, so the utilisation of maps, the application of them, and the creation. So an inquiry in geography is based around the process that you can see displayed on the screen. So we would start with planning, maybe forming a question or a hypothesis. Children would do a risk assessment. They would decide suitable locations to conduct their fieldwork. They'd perhaps identify an issue or a problem that they'd like to investigate. This would then follow with data collection, so they would be deciding on the equipment to use, their method, could be observations, interviews, surveys, collecting measurements, collecting flora, that sort of thing. Weather data, the list could be endless depending on the question or the hypothesis. They can do this as a group or as individuals. Then moving on, when they have collected their data, they would present it. So if they have numerical data, that would be likely presented in the form of tallies, graphs, pictograms for younger children, maybe infographics, maps, creating maps, images, photographs, diagrams, flowchart, text. Again, how they present that data could be entirely up to them as the pupil as they become more independent, or up to you as the teacher. They would analyse that data, so maybe explaining patterns, cause effect, relationships, comparing and contrasting, interpretation, speculation. But to analyse data well, similar to a history inquiry, they do need to have knowledge and they do need to have context. Moving on then, we would expect them to make conclusions, so their opinions, judgments, use their evidence to answer their question or prove their hypothesis. And then finally ending with an evaluation. So ultimately, what has gone well, even better if, what could they do differently? How valid or reliable is their data? What other evidence do they need? And their evaluations could then lead them on into a new cycle of inquiry. Now, I appreciate that whole process there I've explained, that ultimately you wouldn't be expecting a child in year 1 or year 2 to achieve, but certainly collaboration with a teacher, there is a lot of elements that you could do collectively as a class, and with differentiated support from you as the teacher. So the Geographical Association have a lot of free resources on their website and ideas for conducting fieldwork with children in the classroom. The resources are divided into primary and secondary. So the link on the left of your screen should take you to those resources. Now, they also hold in the summer term what they deem and call a fieldwork fortnight. So last year, that fieldwork fortnight was held in June, and the theme last year was on the environment. So the link on the right of your screen will take you to last year's resources. I'm not sure of what the theme will be this year just yet, but I'm sure that before long they will launch it. So keep an eye on their Twitter account, and as soon as I know what that is, I will share it with you also. But generally at that time, they publish additional resources for fieldwork. And if your children are engaging in fieldwork fortnight, there's even a certificate that is available online that you can utilise to distribute. So that's a geographical inquiry. With regards to RVE, social science and a business studies inquiry, it would follow a very similar process as a geographical inquiry. Just the primary methods of data collection and the methods you would use would probably lend themselves more to things like observations of people, surveys and interviews, rather than collecting hard data, counting, that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do now is Glanas Primary School have been trying to develop their map skills within their humanities curriculum. Unfortunately, Glanas are not able to be with us this afternoon, so we do have a video from them. This is a snippet of a much larger video. This short snippet is going to focus purely on how they've been developing map skills, but located within the file section of this team space is their whole recording. It's 20 minutes long, but it does show you how in Glanas Primary School they've been trying to develop inquiry skills from a history point of view, a geography point of view, and also from historical interpretation point of view. So we'll just pause momentarily to watch this video that's presented by Jo Peters from Glanas Primary School.
One of the things that we were looking at was developing mapping skills progressively. We felt as though when we looked at the statements of what matters, although we've done map work, it probably wasn't progressively consistent. There wasn't a wide variety of use of different types of maps. We were maybe all using the same types of atlases. So we've really kind of delved into that. And one of the things we started off with was looking at just where the children's mapping skills are currently. So we completed a whole school mapping exercise whereby the children just had to think about their local area and what was important to them and just represent it in some way through a drawing, through a piece of writing to explain a map. And our plan is to repeat that at the end of the year once we've had a little bit of a focus on mapping skills, just to see whether the progression has made a difference and whether there's been an improvement in the children's understanding of those mapping skills. So there's some examples there from reception year 2, year 5 and year 6, just to show where the children are at currently, really. The reception ones are particularly lovely. Obviously, the teachers have scribed those. But like I said, the reasoning behind it is to try to make sure that we are actually developing those skills for our learners in a progressive way so they're not becoming stagnant. In terms of Digimaps, we had an initial PL for staff, which was delivered by myself because I'd attended the original training. And to start off with, because it's quite daunting, it's a fantastic piece of software, but it can be quite complicated if you're not familiar with it. So we just said to staff, look, have a go. Try and identify some opportunities to use it within the classroom, and that can be teacher or child led. So we would expect children to be using it higher up the school, but we said, initially it could be something that you're just sharing with the children lower down. And some year groups did use it successfully to support some of their humanities teaching in the autumn term. So some examples here just of how it was used. So year 2 were looking at their local area and looking at the thread of recognising distinct features of places, environments in their local localities. They started off by actually finding out where the school was on the map and then looking for various landmarks that they recognised and noticed that were around the school area and important to them. So really following on from our initial mapping activity. Year 5, in contrast, have been looking at the Industrial Revolution. So they took it to looking at plotting railways. So they had a look at some of the first railways and where they were and plotted them on the map to really think about how the implementation of those railways really affected the Industrial Revolution across Wales, but also across the UK. And then in year 6, we did something slightly different. So I teach in year 6. We were looking at remembrance, and we used the Digimaps to actually have a look at different types of memorials. So we looked at World War I, and we looked at Ypres and the Somme. So we were looking at France and Belgium, and the children then decided where they wanted to look. They were given a list of memorials and then asked to use the locations to actually find and plot those on the Digimaps, and then followed that up by then searching for images and dropping those into the maps. And then we did some follow-up work then where they were either researching information about that or starting to look at the map and look at the different types of memorials to reflect on the different countries that were involved, the number of casualties that were involved, the differences in the memorials, the different countries represented by the memorials. So in a short space of lessons, they actually got a considerable amount of learning just from that one particular activity, and they absolutely loved using the software as well.
So Jo mentions Digimaps there, and I'm going to come to that momentarily. Glenasg are not here, unfortunately, but does anybody have any questions about that short snippet from their video? And I'll do my best to try and answer them. But if not, I'll share Jo's email with you at the end if you do have any other questions. No? Okay, so Jo did mention Digimaps there. It's an online digital mapping platform that you need to purchase. So I know many of you on screen this afternoon have already signed up to attend the PL that's starting on Monday. If you haven't managed to sign up for that PL, if you are able to attend one of the sessions that you can see displayed on the screen, then what we will do in EAS is we will provide your school with the funding to then purchase the Digimap subscription if you attend one of the PLs. Unfortunately, Newport Caerphilly are fully booked. I could probably squeeze a couple more people onto the Torfaen session, but there are plenty of spaces on the Blaenau Gwent and Monmouth session if you weren't already attending one of those. Booking has closed, but by all means, if you'd like to attend and you're not already signed up, then just drop me an email and I can add you to the list. So additional PL then that we have that will help you with geographical inquiry is Map Skills in the primary classroom. This is taking place on the 1st of February at Newbridge School. It will provide you with guidance on how to develop pupils' map skills progressively. It will be a practical session where you will look at using a range of maps and how they can be used in the classroom progressively. So if you use the link on the screen, that should take you to Ticket Source for you to be able to reserve your place. Then on the 21st of March, hopefully when the weather is a little bit better, we have a session on conducting fieldwork in the primary classroom. This will also be held at Newbridge School by a geography specialist. Again, it will be very practical and hands-on, hence the need and the desire for better weather. So again, if you use the link on the screen, that should take you to Ticket Source to reserve your place on that PL. So I'll just pause momentarily in case anybody'd like to access those links. And in the meantime, if anybody has a question, then please pop it in the chat or shout out. Oh, yes, I can see Langstone Primary, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Hi, sorry, Bridie. We've got somebody booked on the Torvine, and is that at Green Meadow Primary School?
Yeah, that's correct.
Monday?
Yeah.
We've got it down as starting at 1, but on here it says AM.
That is a typing error on my part. Well spotted.
Oh.
I didn't even notice that. You are right. Your email's correct. The Torvine is Monday afternoon and the Newport session is in the morning. Sorry about that.
Brilliant. No, thank you. Just wanted to check.
No, thank you for spotting it. Any other queries? Okay, then I'll move on. So moving on then, we'll now move on to the second statement of what matters, which is events, human experiences are complex and perceived and interpreted and represented in different ways. So this statement of what matters is focused on the skill of interpretation. Now, traditionally in school, within humanities disciplines, history, interpretation skills are more used in history and RVE, but that's not to say they cannot be developed within geography. From a history point of view, these interpretation skills are harder than inquiry skills, perhaps, because interpretation skills are formed using primary or contemporary evidence, and the problem could be that the primary and contemporary evidence you're using might not necessarily be reliable. So ultimately, interpretations are opinions about past events or people from the past. It's about understanding the opinions of others and understanding there are different versions of the past, whether that be an event or a person. And then as a child progresses, it's about understanding why people have different interpretations. Now, when a child is competent in distinguishing between different interpretations and understanding why people have different interpretations, they can then start to discuss how valid interpretations are. Again, it's harder because there are more layers to the skill, perhaps, and there are nuances between inquiry and interpretation skills. So when we look at interpretation skills, we first of all look at the difference between interpretations. And to do that, looking at how one interpretation is different from another, again, we'd look at the content of that interpretation. So what does it say if it's a written source, or what does it show if it's a painting, a picture, a photograph, and so forth. This is probably the easiest part of the skill. But then, as I said, as the child gets older, they get more competent. You might start to discuss why interpretations are different. So in order to do that, again, similar to inquiry skills, you would need to use the attribution. So we would look at, again, who created it, where it was created, where, the type of document, the purpose, and the intended audience. Very similar to inquiry, but you're just going to use those bits of information to look at the evidence from a different point of view. And in this instance, you would use it to look at why the interpretation has been formed. Again, if your children, by the time they were in year 6, probably, we would expect this, were really competent in distinguishing between how interpretations are different and why they are different, and they can explain that fully, then you could start introducing how valid the interpretation is. Now, again, this is harder because you'd have to use the same information, who created it, when it was created, and so forth. So it's better off to master the difference between the interpretations using the content, and then if they can do that, then considering why the interpretations are different. So just a very short snippet then from Glanis Primary again, just a couple of minutes. They have been trying to introduce interpretation skills with their pupils. So I'm just going to play the video again from Jo at Glanis Primary, just a couple of minutes, and she'll explain how they've been trying to develop interpretation skills.
So I won't run through the statements of what matters 1 and 2 in any detail, because I'm sure Bridie either has already done that or will be doing that as part of this meeting. But we just really reflected on looking at what it meant. So what skills specifically were listed in those statements of what matters in order to be able to develop the children's skills of inquiry and interpretation. And then we had a go, so in year 6 again, with me taking the lead on it, we have decided that for our own professional inquiry, we're going to be looking at the children's development of language and skills through historical either inquiries or interpretations, and how teaching specifically to certain elements of not just the humanities skills, but also literacy skills, whether or not we can see an improvement in the way the children use language to describe things. So year 6, we looked at this interpretation. So it was a copy of an oil painting, which was produced by a British painter after the war had ended. So we spent some time talking to the children about, obviously, the question there you can see, what does it tell us about the impact of war in France? So the children, we did it as a guided exercise because it's something they haven't done before. And we used different colours to kind of, for the children to annotate around the picture what they were able to see, what they thought that told them. And then we gave them a bit of background about the painting and introduced the idea of bias and time, and whether things are a snapshot or how we can gauge whether they really give us a true sense of reality. And then just got the children to think about it. And we're planning to do one of those per half term now with year 6, as I said, just to see how it helps to develop their skills.
So that was short and sweet. And as I said at the start, there is the full video from Glannis Primary School. It's about 20 minutes, but it's located in the file space within this team if you want to watch the whole video. Again, does anybody have any questions about what you just heard from Jo? I'll do my best to answer them.
Right, did you have to be able to interpret to build inquiry skills or vice versa?
No, so the two skills are separate, and I would never encourage you to teach inquiry skills and interpretation skills at the same time. You do one or the other when you're doing your topic project, because it would just become too complicated and too complex for them to stand. Children who have studied history up to A level really struggle to combine the two skills. So yeah, please do one or the other, because you likely the child will get confused and you might get confused as well as a teacher. So just don't overcomplicate it.
Thank you.
No problem. Are there any other questions? No. Okay, so just to help you out then, again, if you wanted to, we do have some professional learning coming up shortly regarding analysing and evaluating interpretation skills within the primary classroom in humanities. This is on the 8th of February, again at St Joe's Roman Catholic High School. So the link on the screen again should take you to Ticket Source if you wanted to reserve your place on that PL. Or if there may be a member of staff within your school who would benefit from this as well. So please, it's not just for middle leaders, they're for everybody. So why teach interpretation skills and inquiry skills then within humanities? So teaching and learning these humanities skills, you will be explicitly addressing these 3 areas and principles of progression. So, for example, learner effectiveness, the children will be asking inquiry questions. As they become more independent, they'll find their own sources, collect their own data. In a geographical inquiry, they might make predictions. And then as children get older, they'll start making judgments on the usefulness and reliability of the evidence and the interpretations they're using. They'll be developing their sophistication of skills. And as I said at the start, these skills are not separate to literacy skills. They are intrinsically linked to those cross-curricular skills. So they'll be forming and framing inquiry questions, using evidence, again, using usefulness and reliability, evaluating interpretations, and ultimately then these skills can be transferred into other areas. So just quick examples off the top of my head, it could be analysing a text in English or analysing a piece of artwork or music. The skills are transferable. Not only that, as you can see from the areas I've highlighted on the screen, you'll also be developing their integral skills. So creativity and innovation, critical thinking, problem solving, personal effectiveness, and their planning and organisation skills, which ultimately will help you achieve the 4 purposes. Most obviously, it will help learners become ambitious, capable learners, and you can see the specific areas I've underlined, but also ethically informed citizens. So this is not something that's add-on. By doing and teaching these humanities skills, you are hitting so many other elements of the curriculum. So before we go into breakout rooms, does anybody have any questions? If in your school you as practitioner or another practitioner would like any support with any of the things I've mentioned, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. My email's on the screen. I'm more than happy to support practitioners with collaboratively planning and preparing sources of evidence, interpretations, and so forth. So please don't think twice about getting in touch. Were there any questions? So again, I'll take the silence that everyone's okay. So this is a network meeting, so I'm going to pop you back into breakout rooms. The Jamboard link, if you click the image on the right of the screen, should take you to the Jamboard. And these questions that are displayed on screen should be on the Jamboard. So within your groups, perhaps have a discussion. How are you developing the humanities skills of inquiry and interpretation within your classroom or your curriculum? If you're a middle leader, how are you trying to monitor the development of these progressively? And ultimately then, what would be your next steps following this network meeting this afternoon? Is there anything you're going to do to enhance or improve your practice going forward? Is there anybody who'd like to share any of the discussions that happened in their breakout room? Any thoughts, observations that came to light?
I'll go, Bridie.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Amy.
I realised that actually I'm not teaching inquiry skills explicitly. Although, like, I've been on your training and what Lisa shared from Goitra was amazing and stuff. I haven't been doing that, so that's definitely something I'm going to take forward, and something that's going to suit my current concept at the minute. So yeah, it's brought that to life. We're only human, aren't we? And we've got 101 things to do, but yeah, I'm not teaching those skills explicitly, and that's something obviously I want to achieve. So yeah.
Oh, thank you for being honest. And you probably are not the only person, because you are right. As individuals, as teachers, we have 1,000,001 things to do. So sometimes things do, drop off our radar, but acknowledging that, then that's a great start. Anything else from any other groups? Anybody like to share?
Can I just ask one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Our current focus at the moment is science, and obviously within that you've got inquiry, skills that are specifically set for science content. Would you say skills that you're developing would into the other areas of learning and experience, or is it specific for historical and geographical content?
No, well, I suppose you broke up a little bit there. So I think what you're saying though about it aligns to cross-curricular skills. So correct me if I'm wrong, or cross-curricular projects. So I suppose it depends what the science focus is and what your humanities progression maps and curriculum also is like and whether the two can align. Don't get me wrong, there
Yeah.
are certain science experiments that actually go hand in hand with a geographical inquiry, but then there are others that obviously they know they're not going to. The process though could be quite similar within both.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question. Was that what you were thinking?
Yes. Yeah.
Any other observations, thoughts, questions?
Hi, Bridie, Rob.
Yeah. Hi, Rob.
Obviously, I've recently, well, since September, I've only been in Llanrabban since September.
Yeah.
And we're going through the process of trying to embed the new curriculum with the humanities part of that.
Yeah.
And so we're at the moment a little bit. I don't suppose we're at the stage yet where I'm looking to monitor how everybody's going with it. We're still at that kind of embedding stage. It's something I will get around to. We'd kind of reached that point at Glaslook before, and so we're just trying to reach that stage here. But I think we're doing okay at making sure as individual teachers, it's on everybody's radar, so to speak. But from my perspective as humanities lead, I'm certainly not monitoring it yet. I think that will probably come from September onwards.
Yeah, and that's everyone's at a different point in their journey. You know, some people are just dipping their toes in the water with some of this. Like Amy is in Pentline has done a lot of work on curriculum design and, you know, embedding their humanities curriculum. But like even she just admitted, this is now something that, you know, she needs to think about, because thinking about one AOLE and all the different layers to it is massive, but trying to think about all of them is obviously even, you know, much bigger. So I think that's quite okay, Rob. You know, you need to do it. It's on your radar, but you know, it's coming soon, so to speak. Thank you again also for being honest. Is there anybody else who'd like to share anything? No. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for those who did just share, and also thanks everybody for populating the Jamboard. There is an awful lot of post-its on there, and that's really helpful to me actually moving forward with future PL as well. So just a couple of things for you to be aware of now, just before we wrap up. So other professional learning that you might be interested in attending. I know I've already mentioned a few events already within this meeting, but on the 28th of February, St. Joe's are opening their Year 7 classroom doors for teachers to observe Year 7 history, teaching and learning. So this would be particularly beneficial perhaps to Year 5 and 6 primary practitioners. No doubt that Adam and the history department at St. Joe's will be teaching and learning quite a lot of those skills that you saw Lisa doing with her classes. So, you know, that might be beneficial to you. We've also got some RVE subject knowledge webinars coming up. There is a webinar for each major world religion plus humanism. They will be online. Unfortunately, I don't have the direct booking links, I'm sorry, but if you click the link on the screen, it should take you to our PL brochure. And then if you scroll to page 59, you should find more details of those individual sessions. So it might be a case that you would like to attend the Hinduism session, but you feel like you don't need to attend the Christianity session. So you can pick and choose as you wish with that RVE. So again, I'll just pause momentarily for you to click any links on the screen if you wanted to. And then two other events that you may be interested in as well. A couple of you actually flagged this up on the Jamboard. So Glannas Primary have a sharing event coming up this term. It will be split into two parts. Part A will look at how they have designed their humanities curriculum and the time they have dedicated to that and the documentation they have produced. And then the follow-up part B the teachers of Glanes will be opening their doors for you to engage in a learning walk and listening to learners and so forth to see their curriculum in action. Then Lisa is also doing something very similar, opening their doors in Goitrevau to share how they have incorporated humanities concepts into their vehicle curriculum approach. So there'll be 2 opportunities for you to attend those sessions at Goitrevau. The first is on the 2nd of July, and then the second session is on the 9th of July. And a little bit different to Glanes, though those 2 sessions are exactly the same. It's just 2 opportunities if you're unable to make one of them. So again, fingers crossed the hyperlinks on the screen take you to the booking links on Ticket Source. So I suppose that's it from me. If there are any questions, then please pop them in the chat and mute their mic. Before you shoot off this afternoon, I'd be really grateful if you could fill in the evaluation form. So again, the link on the screen and the QR code should take you to the form.